Yeah, we're live. So, Steve, welcome back.
Thank you for having me as always.
Yeah, we ended the last stream unceremoniously because my phone acted up and I couldn't get back.
Yeah, dude, I was legit worried.
Yeah, I knew you were going to be worried that what happened to this dude. He just disappeared and left me alone to this stream all by myself.
I was unprepared. I did the best
Sorry
I could
about
though.
that. Yeah. I know you can always hold forth and I can always count on you. So, yeah. So, I would have wanted us to just end the stream that way, the way it ended, but there was still a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
There was still a lot to talk about that I just couldn't just let it go like that. So we're going to play that clip again, that 10-minute clip, and react to
Okay.
it from there. Yeah. So
Sounds good.
let me just put it on. So if you're just joining us, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers and reacting to Sam Harris and his claims that Trump is worse than Osama bin Laden. So we're trying to play a clip, and from this clip, from what we get from this clip, we'll just react to the comments that Sam has made.
The context
So
was a
let's go.
90-minute podcast, where I said many things that make this clip much easier to understand. However, as I said, I definitely created several problems for myself by bumbling around a bit, and genuinely misspeaking at one point. Now, the fact that I actually misspoke will be very easy to demonstrate, because the word I used really does contradict everything I said in the setup to the clip. And it's contradicted by what I begin to say in the very next sentence. But it's certainly my fault for using the wrong term. Before I deal with the clip, I want to emphasize again that I usually speak very precisely, even when I seem to be saying something extremely provocative. For instance, I've said on several occasions that I think Donald Trump is a worse person than Osama bin Laden. Now, the statement is obviously meant to get your attention. I get that it's surprising, but it's not meant to be hyperbolic. I can defend every word of a statement like that. What I can't defend are people's misunderstandings and erroneous extrapolations of a statement like that. Perhaps I should just clarify that statement again, because it actually goes a long way to explaining my view of Trump, why I think he's such a terrible person, but not nearly as scary as some people think he is, and not nearly as scary as many people think I think he is. I think Osama bin Laden was a more or less normal human being, psychologically. He was just living in the grip of a dangerous and idiotic worldview. The moral structure he imagined he was living under and wanted to impose on the rest of the world, given his beliefs, was despicable. So he created immense harm, and it's very good that we killed him. But within the framework of his odious beliefs, he demonstrated many virtues. He was a man who certainly seemed to be capable of real self-sacrifice, and he was committed to ideals beyond his narrow self-interest. He was, by all accounts, personally quite courageous. I don't claim to know that much about him, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was generally a person of real integrity and generosity and compassion in his dealings with his fellow Muslims. None of these things can be said about Donald Trump. Trump is, without question, one of the least honest and most malignantly selfish human beings I have ever come across. And the paradox here, it's not really a paradox, but it's what makes the point I'm making confusing to many people. The seeming paradox is that if Trump were a better person, he would be worse in many ways. If he were brave and self-sacrificing and idealistic, if he were capable of being strongly committed to something beyond his narrow self-interest, he would be capable of creating much greater harm in the world. But he's not. He is a child in a man's body. He lies as freely as he breathes, and just as compulsively. He can't even put the interests of his children above his own, much less commit himself to any ideal that requires real self-sacrifice. Unlike bin Laden, it is patently obvious that Trump isn't psychologically normal. He really is missing something that almost every other person on Earth has. He is an absolute black hole of self-regard. When I say that wherever you are on Earth, you could probably walk 1,000 miles in any direction and not meet a less admirable human being than Trump. I mean it in the terms I just described. The man is almost completely lacking in personal virtue. If he weren't funny, and I admit he can be funny, he might actually be the least admirable person on earth. Now, some of this is just my opinion, of course, but much of it isn't. Okay, to say that Trump lies incessantly, and with a velocity almost never encountered anywhere else in human life, is a fact. It is demonstrable. It is nearly self-evident, and has been for decades. It is as true and uncontroversial as saying that he's around 6 feet 2 inches tall. I realize that when I say this sort of thing, it sounds like an expression of personal hatred and of my own political partisanship. But it is neither of those things. I don't hate Trump. I hate the fact of him. I hate the space he occupies in our world. I hate what he has done to our politics. Yes, I know his ascendance politically is a symptom of many underlying problems, but he has also exacerbated those problems massively. Trump isn't the answer to wokeness and leftist hysteria, because he has done more than anyone to produce that hysteria. If you want to see how crazy the left can get, just elect Trump for a second term in 2024. We have a real problem of populist irrationality and misinformation and tribal lunacy on both the left and the right. Trump has made that problem astronomically worse on both the left and the right. It's not about hating the man. I hate the phenomenon. I didn't hate Trump when he was just a charlatan on The Apprentice. I ignored him. And my criticism of Trump isn't remotely partisan. It isn't even political, because what I have to say about Trump, I wouldn't say about any other Republican. And many Republicans with whom I disagree about politics share my view of him. I probably agree with most of Trump's politics, in fact. Do I think we should have a secure border? Absolutely. Do I think we should be harder on China? Yes. Do I think that much of the left is in the grip of an insane moral panic? I do. Do I think the phrase defund the police is one of the stupidest ever uttered? Of course. Do I recognize that globalization has produced many casualties in our society? Yes. Am I in favor of onshoring much of our supply chain and energy infrastructure? Yes, I am. Am I appropriately humbled by our misadventures in Afghanistan and Iraq, and now skeptical of our ability to do anything like nation building? Absolutely. All of this significantly overlaps with Trump's policies and with the political concerns of his supporters. I may be an elitist, globalist, Jew asshole, as many of Trump's supporters now allege, but not only don't I denigrate many of their political concerns, I share them. My real opposition to Trump, beyond all the flaws of his character, which again I consider to be so far beyond the norm, that I just cannot believe we even have to think about this man. But the thing that makes him truly irredeemable, and should have made him politically radioactive for Republicans for the rest of his life, is that as a sitting president of the United States, he would not commit to a peaceful transfer of power. He declined to do this repeatedly, many months in advance of the election. I believe this is the most shocking thing to have happened politically in my lifetime. And of course, Trump's lack of commitment to the most basic principle of our democracy laid the groundwork for his big lie about having really won the 2020 election, and for the violence on January 6th. This single fact, among the thousands of other facts that should have disqualified Trump for the presidency, this fact alone should make Trump impossible to defend, much less support, at this point. And the fact that the Republican Party has found a way to ignore this truth, as though it were some tiny detail, is proof that it has become a cult of personality. This is the real Trump Derangement Syndrome, to be defending the indefensible. What we are witnessing now among Republicans is not normal politics. So when I describe Trump as an existential threat to our democracy, I'm thinking about things like the willingness to abide by the results of an election and the peaceful transfer of power, the very norms that safeguard our democracy. One thing that Trump taught us is that we rely on norms in so many ways, and in some ways even more than laws. It's quite possible that all of what Trump did to corrupt and destabilize our institutions was legal. It remains to be seen whether he's committed any crimes at all. It's legal to just ask the Russians on television to hack the emails of your political opponent, and there's no price to pay when they actually do that very thing. It's apparently legal to campaign on the promise that you'll lock up your political opponent when you win. And it seems legal to openly lie about having won an election that you actually lost, and to encourage a mob to gather in Washington to, quote, stop the steal. And when they begin storming the Capitol and calling for the murder of your vice president in order to stop the steal, it may be legal to just sit on your hands when you're the only person on earth who can do anything to stop the violence, just to see if things somehow play out in your favor. There don't appear to be laws to defend our democracy against this sort of thing. It's just that we've tended to expect that our politicians won't behave in these ways. And normal politicians, or even just decent human beings, won't. For better or worse, the integrity of our democracy depends on hundreds of norms like these not being violated on a daily basis.
Steve, so I think there's a lot to unpack there. There is a lot. I've made some notes on the point that I'd love us to talk of. So let's start with the first one. Trump is worse than Laden. He says he's not being hyperbolic. He says he's doing it to obviously get people's attention. Yet he says he can prove that statement that Trump is worse than Bin Laden. And he goes ahead to prove what he means by that, extolling the virtues of Bin Laden, saying that Bin Laden was under the grips of a bad ideology, and that he has no doubt that Bin Laden is a virtuous person, certainly had virtues aside from him being under the grips of a bad ideology. So let's go. What are your thoughts? You're muted, Steve.
You know, it's difficult to make or even support the kind of claims that Sam's making, because there's an inherent flaw that it seems like we're almost being led away from as a viewpoint, right? And what I think that is that he's again making conflations between two people and their characteristics and the consequentialism that follows it. You know, he may be right about Bin Laden being virtuous to people that he agrees with, but this is where I find the similarities, is where they disagree and how they treat people they disagree with is almost identical. So I think that the false equivalency between those two people is a fallacy in and of itself. And second of all, he makes the statement that, and you know, I'm going to assume and move forward with the position that Sam is correct about Trump, because I happen to believe those things too, about his personal character. But let's take that back a step here. He says, if Trump was a better person, he would have done a worse job. That seems disingenuous and irrational to make that argument, because that would say, like, we could all be better people and the world would be worse for it. That's an odd argument to try and make. And then it traps us into this box of moral relativism that I don't think plays itself out well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let me first of all comment on the character of Trump. Now, I have often asked myself, why did I like this guy? Why did I like Trump? I mean, this is someone who obviously has serious character flaws. This is someone I could never be friends with in real life. I mean, Trump has no virtues or characters that is worth extolling, that anyone would see and say, I like his characters. But there was something else I saw in Trump. I think even Sam Harris outlined some of those things. outlined the reasons why some people would like Trump or why they voted for him. There were things that were outside of his character. For example, his policies. But aside his policies, another thing that drew me to Trump was because I saw that he was an effective force against the lunacy and the madness I was seeing in the Democratic Party. I just thought that the Democratic Party was losing it, and it seems as if no one was standing up to them. And here comes this upstart, this guy who's never been in politics, and he's saying the most outrageous things that would end any American politician's career. Yet he wasn't taking a hit. I mean, I just saw him progressing and progressing. So he was fascinating to me in that sense. So he did not embody any sort of moral virtue that anyone could look up to. But he held something else for me. One, he was a veritable force against the madness I was seeing on the left and in the Democratic Party. And also because his policies were common sense policies. Who doesn't want a secure border? Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want the economy to be strong? Who doesn't want the jobs to be domiciled in the economy? Who doesn't want security? Who doesn't want the police to be more effective? Who doesn't want all those things that Trump was talking about? These are policies that I'm sure Democrats in the past have run on, and nobody saw an issue with it. But because it came from Trump, it is now seen as, these are seen as racist, these are seen as xenophobic, these are seen as bad things. So I can agree with Sam that Trump has a shitty person. He's a shitty person. He had a terrible character. That is not in dispute. Now, I can also agree with him when he says, not that I agree with him, but I can see his thought processes when he says, if Trump were a better person, he would have been worse. Which means that if Trump was more competent, given his character, if he was more strategic, if he was someone as competent and strategic as forward-thinking like a Hitler, he would have done much more damage. But because he's obviously a fool, his incompetence showed that he couldn't do anything substantial or much damage. But that is contradictory to Harris claiming he's an existential threat. Because if he's a fool, there's only so much he can do. He's not this scheming. He doesn't have the capacity to scheme so much to cause that much damage. He's just going to. I wrote an article in when Trump won in 2016 on my Facebook page, and I said either Trump is going to become like a Hitler, or he's going to be like a Forrest Gump who just stupidly makes his way and succeeds. And I think he became Forrest Gump. I mean, he just stupidly, but he's just progressing in sort of his stupidity, but he was progressing.
Yeah.
You get?
Yeah.
So I don't see how Sam can reconcile saying that he's an existential threat and saying he's a bumbling fool who cannot even tie his shoes. Which is it? You have to pick one.
Yeah.
He cannot be both at the same time. If he's a fool, everybody will just laugh at him and he'll get out of there. But if when you say someone is an existential threat, it means that this person has the competency, the capacity to really do harm if they want to.
Yeah.
Look at the whole January 6th fiasco. Trump, if you see Trump, you'll be like, is this guy even serious? Other politicians might even be looking for ways to, okay, what are the legitimate or the legal ways? So this guy was unconcerned. He was playing golf. What does that tell you about this guy? So I just see the disconnect. Like Christina says, Sam Harris is taking this thing too personal. He's overcomplicating a very simple issue. People can be people can look at Trump's character and feel disgusted by it. Yet they can see, if you remove all those things, at the core of what he's saying actually makes sense. And that is why he got 74 million votes, for crying out loud. Are you trying to tell me that those people are stupid? Those people, they just look at Trump and they saw all his character flaws, and despite all that, they decided to go for him. No, there was something else, and Sam is not saying that. He's not saying that.
Yeah, I keep coming back to that statement that if he was a more virtuous and more brave person, he'd be more dangerous. And I have to disagree with that in a way, because, and I agree with your point. Actually, you've got a really great point, and I'm not disputing that point. Mine is that if someone is somewhat intelligent, plus they're brave and virtuous, they have to be functioning on the level of what Sam would call the pursuit of more well-being or better well-being over time, right? So we can have something that harms us today, but overall, if we practice it in society for long enough, the positive benefits of well-being being increased substantially increase. So he's not being consistent with his own beliefs. And this is kind of where my whole position is coming from, is if Sam would have stuck with the arguments that he's made in the past, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. I think he's got a deeply flawed logic, and yes, while I think we both can agree he is overly attached to Trump. How would you put that? He's definitely over attached to Trump, and I think that's blinding his reason. And that's not to say that Trump is still a horrible choice. It's like the reason and the heuristics you use to get to the final conclusion in what I've been arguing is important.
Yeah. Now, the most damning part of this, before we go to the other part, was him even making that comparison between Trump and Bin Laden in the first place. He seems to have a fetish for dead bodies. I don't know why. I mean, in the other states, the other podcast, he said that it wouldn't matter if Hunter Biden had dead bodies of children in his basement. Now he's drawing a comparison between someone who has killed thousands of people. And like I said in the last stream, I would take Trump's character flaws any day, over Bin Laden's virtues, because as far as I know, Trump hasn't killed anybody, but I know for a fact that Bin Laden has killed people. So it doesn't matter what sort of virtue Bin Laden had or has. That comparison doesn't make any sense and shouldn't even come into play in the first place. It doesn't make any sense.
I absolutely agree. The thing is that he's bringing up Hunter Biden and the dead bodies of children in his basement, but he seems to recognize that Bin Laden put 3,000 lives of men, women, and children not in the basement, but literally on the first floor. So the argument he's making doesn't make any sense. It really just doesn't make any sense when you take a look at it. But what Sam is doing the same thing that Trump is doing, which is making fallacious arguments and appeals to emotion in order for us to agree with him. Like this is a political tactic. So it makes me immediately distrustful of Sam. It's like, why are you trying to pull at my heartstrings? Why don't you just make a rational argument? Like, just make the bloody rational argument. And that's why I'm upset at Sam, is because he didn't do that. He's using the same tactics that he says he deplores. It's like, make it make sense, Sam, which he didn't.
And there's just so many inconsistencies, even within a few seconds of his statement. After extolling the virtues of Bin Laden, after saying that he has no doubt that Bin Laden has these and these virtues, he now says that he doesn't claim to know so much about Bin Laden. So based on what was he making those inferences? If you're just admitting now that you don't know much about this guy, so how did you cook up such virtues in your head? How did you come about that? It's crazy, man.
I don't know, dude. I don't know. It's incredibly frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating. Something else to bring up here, though, is that what Sam is also doing is he's making an argument of, well, and I might be stretching myself on this one. So I'll premise it by that. but it almost seems like he is committing himself to a false dichotomy of good and bad. Like, I've said this before, Alexander Solzhenitsyn believed that all men had a line that divided straight through their heart between good and evil, and that we oscillated between these two sides fairly frequently. But even when we were at our most evil, there's still a small upturned corner of good within our hearts. And Trump, while he might be the worst person on the planet, I don't have the expertise to be able to judge that, right? I have to go based off of just subjective beliefs. You know what I mean? So he seems to be making this error of assuming that there's a dichotomy within Trump of either being good or bad. And it's like, I have a hard time believing that he doesn't love his children, that he doesn't love his wife, that he doesn't love his country, or that he doesn't love, Big Macs. It's I just don't see where Sam's going with this. Now, if he was to say, these are a list of the horrible things that Trump has done, and I believe that someone of moral virtue should be holding the highest position in the land and the leader of the free country. Therefore, plus he has extremely divisive language and he's combative. That means nothing is going to get done in the House. Nothing is going to get done in Congress, I should say, which is, it's the House and the Senate. Therefore, he's not going to be useful. Therefore, I'm not going to vote for him. I would have no argument with that. Like, I don't think I could make an argument against that, really, because that's a realistic, reasonable argument to make. That's all Sam had to do. But for some reason, he felt like he needed to put an exclamation point on all these fallacious beliefs that he's using to justify his opinion. And it's like, Sam, you don't have to do that. That's not. There's no prerequisite for you to have to do that in order to convince me that Trump is a bad person and should not be elected.
And the thing is, you can pick any two random people and sample their qualities, and one person will be better than one other person in this area, and this person will be better than the other person in this area. Perfectly normal. Any two people, even the worst person that's ever existed, it would have some redeemable qualities. That it might even be better than the nicest Mother Teresa person. You get? Yeah. So you can't just take one quality. You can't just take a set of qualities and use it to define the person. Take another set of qualities and use it to define another person, and just do a zero-sum game and say, no, this person is categorically bad. This person is categorically good. The nuances that he's supposed to put into the argument, he isn't putting it in there. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't know. But let's talk about January 6th. I think this is very crucial. Let's talk about January 6th.
Okay.
When before the January 6th, when I saw the kind of movements that were happening, that there were going to be protests, I was really, really scared. I didn't want it to happen, especially for the sake of Trump. I felt, guy, please don't mess up anything at this point. Concede the election, and maybe try and come back in the next 4 years. But if anything crazy goes down now, you can't walk back from that. And I thought that January 6th was that point. I don't think any politician's career should be able to survive something as bad as January 6th. Now, I'm not saying it's Trump's fault. I'm not saying even if it wasn't his fault, even if it was orchestrated by the Democrats, I don't think any politician should be able to survive that incident. It was obviously so bad. But on the other hand, when you're looking at it and say protest, the Democrats, right from Trump's first day in office, have been inciting protests. They've been inciting protests. And it wasn't Maxine Waters or the other lady the other time that was inciting violent protests. So if the Democrats can do that and get away with it, why is this double standard there? So why should Trump or why should the Republican Party not have that same right to say, we agreed about this, we do not agree with this, so we are going to protest it? I mean, after all, protests they're allowed. people are allowed to air out their grievances, their protests. Just don't make it go violent and all that.
Yeah.
So even during the BLM riots and all that, there were Democrats politicians who were fanning it. During I think the trial for the George Floyd murder, we saw some statements by some politicians that if they don't get a certain result, there's going to be this, there's going to be that. These all came from the Democratic Party. But it's fine. Nobody can say anything about that. It's fine. BLM was doing mostly peaceful protests, even when things were burning down. But it's
when are we going to get sick and tired of the bullshit that politicians like to feed us? Like, when are we going to take a look at the spoonful of bullshit and be like, that's bullshit, instead of being like, but it's Democratic bullshit or it's Republican bullshit? Like, it's bullshit. Like, bullshit doesn't change flavor. You know what I mean? And so it's this the double standard that you're speaking to is the same one that I hold that same opinion is that, and you look at Biden's most recent speech, it was so divisive. Trump's language was so divisive. Democrats and Republicans are so divisive towards each other, and they're willing to burn the other group in order to get the votes of the others. And it reeks of dishonesty. It reeks of, quite frankly, un-American, unpatriotic reason. You know, personally, I hold the position that we should have a conservative government that supports a liberal society. Now, people might be like, well, what the hell does that mean? That seems like it's a contradiction. It's actually not. So if you have a conservative government, and I don't mean conservative as in like current conservative, right? I'm not talking about right-wing conservative politics. I'm talking about conservative in the sense that we refrain from doing unreasonable things or following jurisprudence and common sense, rationality, and a slow-moving, incremental movement through history, right? Measured, reasonable, okay? And then we can have a socially liberal society that says, okay, look, one of the bragging rights of America has always been, you can come here and you can be anything that you want to be. That's always been a mainstay of the American reputation, right? And so what we can do is we can say that conservative government and that conservative Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, right? All these things, they can help maintain and create a stable liberal social movement throughout time. And we can kind of evidence this by how gay people are actually perceived nowadays. I don't know any conservative who still believes that homosexuality is a sin and they shouldn't have the right to live and be who they want to be. I'm sure there's a lot of them. I just don't know them personally. So there's a little bit of a incredulity going on there. But by and large, I mean, even if you look at the numbers of violent attacks on homosexuals, right, on gay people, or even bisexual people like myself, those numbers have dropped significantly since the 80s and 90s, like significantly. The biggest problem facing gay teens in school is not abuse and assault from other students anymore. Some of the younger generation of gay men that I know personally, they're like, yeah, I didn't have a problem. It was awesome. Most of the jocks were cool with me. It wasn't an issue, right? So we can see that this slow progression of changing values can happen as long as we approach them with reasonable, with reason and some degree of enlightenment and compassion. But we have a constitution, a conservative constitution that allows that to happen methodically and slowly. And that's what I want. I want us to be able to look at problems and say, is this something that we need to look at? Or is this something that it's not an issue, right? Or do these people deserve their rights as human beings and Americans? Yes, they do. So how do we move forward with this? Rather than trying to use society as a kingpin of guilt, right? Or a social force to condemn or attack other people. I just don't agree with it. So that's what I mean by that. And so when you have two political parties that do not care about those two things, you have or what becomes a very divisive and vitriolic discord between those two parties. And that's what we're seeing. Trump is a physical representation of the state of our country. Same with Biden. Like we elect people that represent us, right? So we could reasonably say that Biden and Trump represent the worst of what we are right now. That should be an indicator that we need to dial our asses back and say, you know what, maybe we need to take a different approach at this. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think Biden is even more Trump than Trump, aside from the comedy part. Yeah, because I don't think there's any difference right now between Biden and Trump. I mean, with his last speech, that was a Trumpian performance. With you, obviously, the media is going to be the butt of Trump's ire. He's going to say the mainstream media is this, the media is this, the media is that, and all that. But Biden decided to do it with half of the population by calling Republicans MAGA Republicans and how they are a threat to democracy. So in the rhetoric, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just that this one is saying it from the Democratic platform, another person is saying it from the Republican platform. So what's the difference, really? Biden doesn't give a shit as much as Trump didn't give a shit. Trump just did what he wanted to do. And I see the same thing with Biden. During the election campaign, there was one guy that came up to him and he was trying to address certain things. And Biden told him that if he doesn't like this, he should go vote for the other guy. I don't know if you remember that incident. He told, you're telling an electorate, go vote for the other guy. It just shows you the kind of hubris. It's either he feels that the electorates don't matter. He doesn't respect them, or he feels that even without them, I can win. I can even understand that statement in the Nigerian context because they will just, they'll rig the election. They don't need you. You understand? So they don't need They don't need to address your concern. How can you tell a voter that if they don't like this, then go vote for the other guy? So he doesn't care as much as Trump didn't care. So what's the difference? There's really no difference. It's just that Trump was funnier. Trump was funnier, and we had some great laughs during his tenure. So if
I'll give him that. He was funny.
Yeah. So if Biden is coming as the unifier, the great unifier after 4 years of divisive Trump, but then he's doing the same thing, he's doing the same politics. One of the things after the election cycle, after that 2016 election cycle, and the election had died down, at the point I got disappointed with Trump. I was like, dude, election is over. I mean, you need to start doing your job as a president instead of being in the fight mode all the time. And particularly when he was taking issues with his military, I was like, dude, this is your military. You can't be saying shit about your military. These are your people. You're working with them now. So why don't you find a way to work with them? I found that sort of distasteful about Trump at that point in time. But Biden is doing the same thing, demonizing half of the country, even though he puts a caveat that not all Republicans are MAGA. But which Republican doesn't believe in his slogan, "Make America Great Again"? Almost every Republican believes in that. So that's a distinction without a difference that he was doing there.
Well, even the phrase "Make America Great Again" is an appeal to an emotion, because I can't, like, make America great again compared to what? And this is the inference that people on the left are making, is like compared to slavery, compared to Jim Crow, compared to the war on drugs that disproportionately targeted racialized black folk. Like, what part of America being great has there ever been? If he would have left out "again," it would have been a killer slogan, "Make America Great." I mean, even I would have probably been like, that's okay. You know what I mean? And so it's this constant play on the emotions of the electorate. You know what I mean? And Ugh. Biden being the great unifier is the biggest joke.
Let's talk about some other claims that some other ridiculous claims that Sam made. He said it was perfectly okay for Trump to ask the Russians to hack Hillary Clinton's email and then share it. And then I'm wondering, so are you telling me that the Russians were actually waiting for Trump to say that? They were waiting for instructions from Trump to say that before they would decide to hack Hillary Clinton. You obviously know that Trump was joking when he said that. He was just being himself. He was joking. You understand? So why does that matter? If the Russians wanted to hack Hillary Clinton's email, they would have done it whether or not Trump said it. And for the fact that Trump said it doesn't make it anymore, doesn't give it any more credibility or any more weight, doesn't make the hackers suddenly much more powerful to get into our emails. So that was his.
Yeah. There's an interesting point here that I think you might be missing, is that the reason why Trump said that, it was kind of tongue in cheek, but maybe it wasn't. And the reason why is because Trump got elected and said, I'm going to clean house, which he didn't do. But regardless,
exactly.
The problem is why weren't those emails recovered earlier? Why were they not disclosed earlier? Like, why does it have to be a joke that the Russians should hack Hillary Clinton's email? That's the problem. Is like those emails, the Democrats and even Republicans at the time were withholding those from the American public. Why? You know what I mean? And Trump's tongue-in-cheek joke about that is to say, well, at least the Russians will actually expose it. Why are the Russians doing our job? Why are we not doing our job? Why are our democratically elected leaders not doing their freaking job? And that's what Trump was trying to say to that. That's his whole point, was why am I having to ask the Russians to do our job? Now, this is one of the few points that I will actually agree and accommodate Trump in this aspect, is that he really did a great job of exposing. Well, he didn't expose anything. He just gave us credence to our beliefs, because the American public forever has not trusted the politicians of our country. We know they're corrupt. We absolutely know it, but nobody in Washington was acknowledging it. Well, he was the first one that actually acknowledged it out in the open. Like, he said the thing that nobody was saying. And for some reason, this invigorated the mass population to say, well, see, finally somebody gets it. It's like, no, they always got it. That's the problem. They always knew that this was an issue. The fact that someone is up there and actually saying it out loud is not the issue. The issue is that someone had to say it out loud for you to feel comfortable with them saying it. Right? This has always been an issue with American politics, is that each political party hides things from the American people, and sometimes they do it with the knowledge that they're doing it together. Both Democrats and Republicans have done this for years. You know, they use the skeletons in each other's closets to get a little bit more on this side and a little bit more on that side. And this is something that has been endemic to American politics for at least 50 years. At least 50 years.
Now, I want to circle back to the points that Sam made about if Trump were a more competent or effective person, he would have been a much more dangerous person. You know, I was actually very surprised during Trump's presidency that there was no sort of legal or sustained legal attack on any one of the Democratic Party. There was no witch hunt. No, he was just talking. He was just talking, but Trump could very well have taken hold of the machinery of government. He could have restructured everything such that they became loyal to him. But he was still behaving like an outsider. Even when he was the president, he was still sort of behaving like someone who is outside of the machinery of government. He could have done all these I would call it witch hunt, that the two impeachments, the Russian interference in the election that hasn't been proven, and all those allegations that they lodged at Trump. Trump could very well, I don't think any politician is clean. He could very well have looked for the dirt in this politician and that politician, and then mount a sustained, legal and sustained attack on key members of the Democratic Party. But to illustrate that the guy is probably just incompetent, he didn't do any of that. He did not do any of that. He kept just fighting with the media and picking fights with, random people on Twitter and all that. When he could very well, if he was a master strategist, he could very well be sitting down and cooking how to make sure that this I take hold of this government, I take hold of the machinery of government, the Republicans take hold of the machinery of government in the next 8 years or for however long he sees fit. But the establishment is still there. Like you said, he promised to drain the swamp. He didn't drain anything. He just waddled in it and waddled out.
Yeah.
The swamp was still very dirty when he left.
Yeah. What I would have suggested to him is be like, look, dude, you've got to cross political lines to get this all done. Like you've got to appeal to the Democrats. You've got to be able to say, look, we know we've got some crooked people in the Republican Party, but we know we've got some crooked people in the Democratic Party, and we need to do something about that. And he could have worked across political lines to say, I'm going to go after this Democrat. Pick a Republican, and I'll support you investigating them, and let it play out. You know what I mean? But he didn't. He chose instead to be divisive and continue that divisiveness long into his presidency. And that's kind of the answer that I would give to you on that. But also I wanted to touch on something really quick that you said earlier about the January 6th insurrection. The reason why that was such a big deal was that they were interrupting the democratic process of electing a president. That was the big deal. The BLM riots and whatnot, you could arguably say that they were justified in some degree due to social unrest about the racial problem that we have in the U.S. Okay, that's all right. But the January 6th invasion of the Capitol actually was trying to subvert a democratic process of electing a president. And that's why it was such a big deal.
Yeah, I get that. And like I said no politician should be able to survive a mess like that.
No.
It's just too big of a scandal. No
and he was so silent.
That.
He was so silent the whole time the whole thing was happening. And the speech that he gave just before all of that happening, the specific language that he used was very measured, and it was very intentional. And he was very careful not to cross any legal lines as far as like being blatantly obvious and overt. And I do believe personally that he was responsible for it in some measurable degree. And should he have been what's the word for it? Oh, good grief. The word just escaped me again. Impeached for it. Yes, I do think he should have been impeached. But I don't want to keep making the same argument where, well, the left does it too. I don't see them as wholly separate entities anymore. They both don't really give a shit about me. Neither one of them do. They claim they do, but they don't do the work necessary to prove it to me. So as far as I'm concerned, Republicans and Democrats are the exact same party with different colors on their ties.
True. And it's the exact same thing we have in my country, where the two major political parties, they are basically two sides of the same coin. They are just obviously two bad choices. You can't pick one up over the other. They're just the same thing. They may be bearing different names, but they're just the same thing, just as corrupt. And it's sad. It's sad that that's what politics has been reduced to.
Well, they have to spend 80% of their time just trying to get reelected. Like, there's something vastly and seriously concerning about that. Like, so 20% of your time is actually running the government. The rest of the time is trying to get reelected. Wow.
That's
okay,
crazy.
that's not corrupt at all, Charles. Not at all. Could you imagine a politician in Nigeria being like, all right, I'm going to work 20% of the time. The rest of the time, I'm just going to basically screw off and try and get reelected. Like, could you imagine them getting reelected?
They won't say that, but that's what they do. It's all about the power. It's all about the political process. That's basically all they do. There was one point I was trying to raise. One just skipped me. But let's touch about the lying part where um, Sam took issues with Trump's constant lying. The thing is, I think all politicians are liars. Some just lie with a straight face. Trump doesn't give a shit whether you catch him lying or not. He just says it. It's like this joke by I think Chris Rock, who says men and women lie differently. That men might lie, maybe they are in their friend's place and they maybe they're doing something that they just lie that, oh, I'm in another place. See, but a woman's lie is like, it's your baby. I mean, obviously it's not your baby, but she just lies that it's your baby. So there are degrees to it. One is obviously a buffoon kind of non-serious lie. The other one is imagine lying that a kid is a man's kid and it's not a man's kid, and the man has to take responsibility for that child for the next 18 years. You know how life altering that would be, right? So in that sense, what were Trump's lies that were so damaging? What were his lies that were so damaging compared to the scheming of career politicians? These politicians that have been in the both Republicans and Democrats have been in power all their lives. These people have mastered the art of lying. They have mastered it. You can look at the progression of their careers 10 years back and see how they behaved and how they flipped now. They're all liars. So I think it's a given in politics that people lie. So I don't see how Sam can single that out and say because Trump lies compulsively, then this is a disqualifying factor for him. This is what makes him this is part of what makes him an existential threat.
Yeah.
So the point I was trying to make now, I think I remember that point. It was Thomas Sowell who said something about Trump. He said he's never seen someone who sort of is devolving. Like if you listen to Trump in his younger days, he was very articulate, he was smart, he was composed, and it's like he's actually, and I saw that when I listened to Trump's old videos. There were some videos he made with I think Oprah Winfrey and some of all those talk show hosts. This guy was on point, and you would not believe that he's the same person that you see now. Obviously, going back in time. How does that happen? Someone is aging and then he's going back in time instead of him to getting wiser. And it's
well. The interesting thing is, if memory serves, Trump was a registered Democrat for years and years and years and years and years. Now, I might be wrong on that. I'm not 100% confident. But what you're talking about here with the lying, though, is and this is something that was just recently discussed on the Discord server, was that what lies do is they preemptively mass gaslight society. They try to fool us into thinking there's a problem where there's not, or telling us that there's not a problem where there really is a serious problem. And this is the problem when we get politicians in there that we don't hold to a higher standard, which I would agree with Sam on this, is like we need to hold our politicians to a higher standard.
Yeah, we need to, but that doesn't make Trump an existential threat. Because by that logic, all politicians would be existential threats. I think
they are
politicians should be. They very well may be, at least in my country, they are. I can say for a fact that the politicians in my country, they are nuclear threats to my country, they're existential threats to my country. And we could do without them, could do better without them, because they don't care about the people, they don't care about development, they only care about their personal interests. And they're going to screw the country to get what they want to get, whether it's power, whether it's influence, whether it's money. That's what they do.
Yeah, at the very beginning of our country, being a politician was a matter of civic duty. You didn't even get paid. Now, there's a problem with that, because you inherently invite the wealthiest individuals into positions of power, and then it just becomes corrupt again. But to be honest, I still think that we should go back to the previous model, where you get paid a reasonable income, let's say $100,000 a year. You have to submit yourself to legal review, in the sense that you cannot make money off of insider trading, which insider trading is allowed in Congress, because you're you're privy to information that Americans aren't. Like everyday Americans aren't privy to the information that politicians have, senators and House of Representatives, and representatives alike. And this creates an inherent conflict of interest. Like absolutely, it's without a doubt, it's a conflict of interest. But yet we allowed these people to vote this into law that they didn't have to submit themselves before legal review, especially with stock exchange trading. So there's some major issues that we have with our political system, but it should be a civic duty with the mind that we are going to preserve our republic. I don't think that's the case anymore. And so you have people in office that aren't doing the right thing. They're doing the right thing for themselves. They're not doing the right thing for the country. And I think that's a big issue.
And I think there should be term limits for politicians as well. I mean, with the whole, apart from the presidency or the governorship where people can only go for 2 terms, the House of Reps, the Senate, people can be there all their lives. I think it gives room for corruption to set in.
Yep.
How do you just be a career politician all your life? No. There should be term limits to those things so that you revolve the people, revolve the system. If you're going to be having election every 4 years after all, then you might as well just change the people. So what's the purpose of having so much of a frequent election if you're not changing the people? If it's still the same set of people, you could as well just elect them for life. So I think that career politicians, no, I don't think that's it's a good system. That's why somewhat the European parliamentary system, you see how many prime ministers has Britain has had in the last 5 years? They just elected another prime minister the other day. You see, it's sort of the dynamism there. Once they lose confidence in the prime minister, just do a vote of no confidence, and that person is out of there. So it's dynamic. I know it can be disrupting, but in a way, there is more checks and there's more balance in that setting than just allowing people to be there all their lives. It's crazy. It's crazy.
In some ways, I actually do admire the constitutional or the constitutional monarchy of Great Britain, because it's almost like the Queen or whichever royal is in the throne at the point in time is almost behaving as a filter system or a check system where it says, okay, guys, we're going a little bit too far here. Let's dial it back a little bit and refocus ourselves and take a new look at the problem, right? There's been times where the Queen has interjected and actually spoken out and been like, this is not the path we should be on, right? And then the whole country itself, because when she speaks out like that, like people have a tendency to listen, because for the most part, the Queen does not get involved in politics. It's actually very, it's very, what's the word for it? It's a faux pas for them to do that. And so when she does speak out and she does say, hold your tits, something's going on here, and we need to reevaluate this. Their country has a habit and a consistent history of saying, if Queenie is telling us we need to chill the hell out, we probably need to chill the hell out and take another look at this. And so the problem is that, the constitutional monarchy in Great Britain to an extent has a deeply flawed system in the fact that things shift wildly too far, too frequently, right? Ours is a little bit more of a slow pendulum swing. Theirs is very, very brisk. It's at a very brisk pace, to the point where they're starting to outlaw knives at this point. It's like, how in the hell are you going to cook your damn food? Like, you're going to make it a law that you can't take a knife out of the kitchen?
No,
you know what I mean?
Steve, I don't think that's a function of the kind of government. I think that it's a function of what's happening in the West in total right now. Because it's the same thing that's happening in America, where guns are being outlawed, where they want to ban guns. The reason why they're outlawing knives in the UK is because knives are being used to attack people. They're being used to carry out mass stabbings. But the knives have other purposes as well. So it's ridiculous to ban them. But in America, it's just the same thing. Guns have other purposes as well, but they just want to ban them as well. So if if you take all guns out of the US today and people start stabbing with knives, I am telling you that people in the US government they're going to ban knives. They're going to go that route and say, let's ban knives as well. It's that crazy. I think it's something that's just sweeping through the West. See what Canada did.
I think it's an inability on the government's behalf to measure themselves reasonably. And what I mean by that is instead of looking at it and being like, well, knives are the problem, and this is a consistent human character flaw, is instead of saying, well, knives are the problem, we should be saying, what's going on in our country that has people so frustrated, so angry, so violent, that regardless of the weapon, there's a weapon in the first place. You know what I mean? The culture of guns in the United States is vastly different, where we had to fight for our independence and we realized the importance of firearms. We still have a fairly small amount of gun violence in the United States. We have 330 million people, but only about 50,000 people a year die from gun deaths. Like, that's not that much. Now, granted, we should be doing something to curb school shootings, gang violence, and the like. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, we still need to diagnose the underlying cause for this problem, which is, poverty, a lack of the American people to feel connected to their government, a lack of proper education, male role models. I mean, there's a slew of issues here, but yet they continuously want to just identify guns as the problem. No, guns are not the problem. People are the problem. It's always been that way.
I think it's the band-aid approach. They are just doing symptomatic treatment. They're not looking at the root causes of this problem. Yeah. What is causing people to want to kill themselves? What is causing people to want to kill other people?
Yeah. And the vast majority of gun deaths are suicides. Math. So, like a lot. I think it's over half.
Wow.
Yeah. I think the last numbers I remember was, I think it was 23,000 deaths are caused by gun death, or by gun violence. So people killing themselves. The rest were either accidental discharges, out and out murder, and the like. So well over, I think it was 2/3 of the gun deaths in the United States in 2019 was due to suicide.
Wow. And the thing is that such people, it's not as if it's the weapon that prompted them to kill themselves. It's the fact that they wanted to kill themselves and they had the weapon to do it. So probably they would have used other means if the gun was not available to them. Yes, a few persons may have been saved by not having any access to any guns, but some people might be committed to killing themselves anyway, whether they have the guns or not. So you got to ask yourself, why are people doing this? What's at the root of this? Banning the guns isn't going to stop. Is it going to stop people killing themselves? No. But if you get to the root of these issues, then you'll be able to prefer better solutions. But the government is they're always doing quick fixes. Maybe they want to show that they're acting, because at times substantive solutions are usually, they might take time to start showing, might be slow before the effects start showing. An election is in 4 years. They want to tell their people we are doing something, so they just bring out these band-aids, these quick fixes to give the appearance that we're working. Why is it that every time there's a mass shooting, the politicians will come up and start shouting about gun control? Gun control. If you're so damn serious about it, then you should have had your gun control by now. But then they will bring legislation today. By tomorrow, once there's another mass shooting, they will come and bring another legislation. Once there's a mass shooting the next week, they'll bring another. So what is that? If legislation can stop this problem, why not go straight to that definite legislation that will stop the problem? Why are you breaking it? Why are you bringing it in installments? You can just bring that ultimate legislation that will stop the problem at once, and everybody relaxes. But they're not going to do that. They're just going to keep giving you this window dressing. This.
Right.
It's crazy.
It's a weird kind of it's a different kind of gaslighting where they say, yeah, we're taking care of the problem, but yet they don't do anything about it, right? But they say that they're doing something about it, and then they give shallow evidence or misquoted statistics to prove that they're doing something. It's like, no, you're not doing anything. Because if people were really concerned about, you know, the 2/3 of suicide of gun deaths being suicides, they'd be more focused on men's mental health, quite frankly, because men are the majority of those deaths. Well over 90% of gun related suicides are done by men. So it's like, okay, so why don't we focus on men's mental health? Give men and women. I don't want to exclude women in this, because, you know, even 2,000 deaths, suicides by gun, if it's a female, is still a serious problem that I want to solve. So really, it's you're right. It's a Band-Aid without actually addressing the actual problem, which is mental illness and mental health. But when I look at the majority of suicides being male, I have a tendency to believe that there's something that we're missing, which is reasonable availability to men's mental health resources.
Yeah, and that should be looked into, because men are half of the population, and you don't want half your population to kill themselves or to go crazy or to become just a problem to society, knowing fully well that men's capacity for violence and carnage and destruction, if they are not in a good place in society, society breaks down. So men are critical, they're important, but the politicians don't want to do anything. So, Steve, I don't want this to be a long stream, so we might be wrapping up soon. What have we not touched? What have we not touched with the Sam Harris take on Trump? What have we not touched? Okay, I think there was one point we didn't talk about, where he talked about Trump denying the election, the results of the election that he won. This is still not something that is unique to Trump. Hillary Clinton, after the 2016 election, it took her a while for her to even acknowledge that Trump was a legitimate president. So
Al Gore.
I think it's a shtick that politicians do. They always want to discredit the person who won. So it's nothing new. It's nothing out of the ordinary that all of the things that we've highlighted so far, none of it adds up to Trump being an existential threat. None of it. Apart from the January 6th stuff, which we all agree that whether it was his fault or not, no politician should be able to survive that, because it was obviously an assault on democracy itself, on the democratic process. But every other thing that Sam outlined, you could say that about any politician, and that doesn't make them in any reasonable sense a threat, an existential threat. So I don't know.
You know, Trump did a lot of things that should have got him eliminated from any kind of political career, honestly. Even going back to before he was elected, and you know, the discussion about grabbing her by the vagina, or being able to walk into these beauty pageants that he's, you know, producing. And I mean, some of the girls are underage, some of them are not. But you know, the dude's just a bloody ass creep. Like, these are things that in the past no politician would have been able to survive. I mean, even nowadays, some of the politicians, you know, they cheat on their wives and they're automatically out. Why is Trump getting a free ticket through this? Like, this should not be a thing. And when you say you hold Christian values, but yet you're perfectly okay with Trump saying you should grab him by the pussy, that's an obvious and inherent flaw in your reasoning, right? It just doesn't make any sense that you would be okay with one but not okay with the other.
No, Steve, I can defend that point. It's just the same way it's just the same way you would say, why are you trying to impose your moral standards on anyone? So why are you being selective with Christian morality now? Why do you think that this goes against Christian morality, but some other thing doesn't go against Christian morality? Why should Christians accept certain forms of morality and keep a blind eye to other forms of morality? So if you are perfectly okay for them to pick and choose, then they should be able to pick and choose which one they want to choose, right? Take let's take the trans issue or even homosexuality, for example. To many Christians, it's a moral issue. They take issues with that. But you think they are wrong. If you think they are wrong in that moral sense, you want them to accept that kind of morality. Yet when they are accepting something else, it's not as if they're extolling that this thing is good. There is a perfectly good reason. There are other reasons why they are going for Trump, which at least Sam highlighted some of them, which were policy issues. Like I said earlier, Trump has he held no virtues, no redeemable virtues for me, no moral virtues for me as a Christian that I can even hang on to and say, this is why I'm supporting this guy. I wasn't supporting him because of any of such things. If I was looking for a religious figure, I'll go and look for someone else. But I was looking for a political leader, and he was saying the things that make sense to me politically. I didn't care about his morality. I knew, of course, this guy, Donald Trump, the beauty pageants and all that stuff. But another of Trump's appeal is that he presented himself as a human being with flaws and who wasn't ashamed of his flaws. One problem I had with American politicians was I always found them to be phony. They were too clean. They had this very clean appearance. They were too pristine. I felt no one was that perfect. They were too put together. But Trump was like, I don't give a shit. This is me. Take me or leave me. Like me or hate me. This is me. So when he says, grab them by the pussy, he didn't say do that actually. He says when you are rich and famous, they let you. Facts, actually. They let you. He didn't say go grab them. He said they let you do that. Right? And we can all sit here and say, well, that's not true. But we know that rich people have their ways with certain things. And some of these things are consensual. You can see if you go to a concert where a very popular musician is playing, there will be girls lining outside to have sex with him. Why? Because he's rich and famous. So if the musician comes out and says that if you are rich and famous, girls, you have more access to girls or they let you sleep with them, is he not saying the truth? It might not be a morally appropriate thing, but where is the lie in that? So we've got to ask ourselves, what was the lie that this guy told in that instance? Yes, what he said was crappy, but some would say it's locker room talk and should not be said in polite.
Yeah, I disagree, and I'll explain it this way.
Okay.
A person of integrity would not have said that if he was married to a wife, because
he did.
That is something. Hold on, you gotta let me finish.
No. He didn't say I was going about. He said they let you. Go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead.
But the problem is that unless consent is freely given, you can't just go walking up to somebody and grabbing them in the genitalia. That's completely inappropriate. It's inappropriate behavior regardless. You know what I mean? To say that they let you just means that there could be some other mechanism at play here, which is they're rich, they're powerful, and if they speak up, they fear that they may be not asked to come back, or they will be manipulated. I mean, there's a vast number of people who came out during the Me Too movement saying, I didn't do anything because he was in a position of power, and I want to continue into my career. Right? Like there's a power disparity there, and that's the thing that Trump isn't acknowledging. But even moving past that, I'm not going to talk about grabbing women by the pussy, even if it's locker room talk, if I'm married. I don't go around talking about what I do or would do with other women if I'm married to my wife. I just don't do it.
Yeah, this is Trump, and he isn't exactly known for his morality. Now, see, Steve, you are missing the point that women are actually attracted to power. So if you haven't seen there's a power differential there, some women, a lot of women are attracted to power. So you have to make the distinction. How many of these women are not saying anything because they are genuinely attracted to this powerful man showing them sexual attention? Or they are just mortified for their jobs. We could
Yeah.
say, we could never tell, but we do know that women are attracted to power. They're attracted to money. They're attracted to success. So some of these women coming out now and saying, oh, I couldn't say anything because, well, how do we know that that was true? We're not discounting that the power differential can cause some people to not say anything because they want to keep their jobs. But also, we should not discount the fact that many women are attracted to power as well. It's the way society
Sure.
has always been. So,
Yeah. But
I don't know.
that's not a blanket permission to go around grabbing people by the vagina. You know what I mean? Because that person might not be that way.
The operative word there is let. The operative word there is let. For okay, you have a man cutting a woman, right? And the time they have their first kiss, do you think most men ask, "Can I kiss you?" Somehow they go for it, and the woman's response tells them whether or not she's welcome to it. So if she's welcome to it, she lets you do it. So are you going to say that men who make a move, they are creeps? No, they're not creeps. But if she doesn't let you do it and you force your way, that's where the problem is. But you have to make your move in the first place. So
Right.
in this instance, it is him making his move as a man who is not a moral man, making his move. And if they let him do it, that means they have given him consent. They've given him permission. If they don't let him do it and he forces his way, there obviously is a problem there.
Right.
So
Well, you're talking
I
about
think we need to
flirtation.
put that in.
You're talking about flirtation,
We're
and
not
flirtation
just
is
no. These are all sexual behaviors. These are all sexual behaviors. If you grab a woman and kiss her without her consent, you're not going to say that's flirtation. That's sexual assault too. It's just as egregious as grabbing her by the pussy without her
right.
consent. So those distinctions, I don't think those distinctions are even. I don't think they are necessary.
Well, the best way I can put it is let's say that I was at a party, regardless of whether I was married or not, and this chick was hitting on me, right? That still doesn't give me the right to grab them. Like there's no reason for me to do that when I can just simply speak to them and say, "Hey, I like you. Let's go do something." It's worked almost every single time for me. Being blatantly obvious and forward is also something that women can be attracted to, not necessarily power. So the thing that I want to pass along here is that a rule that I live very, very much by, which is when in doubt, go without. I've never had a problem with women in my life to be able to say, I was hanging out with someone at a party and, she was flirting with me. I could say, "Hey, seems like you're flirting with me. Are we good to carry this forward?" You know what I mean? And so I'm putting it in very layman's terms here, but there's ways around doing it. But the thing that I get attached to when I hear about grab her by the pussy means, especially in context of the conversation that we're having, sure, it was locker room talk. Okay. We all do locker room talk. This is a male standard operating procedure. Like we all do it. Absolutely. I will give that to you. Here's the difference that I make with this. There's something about wanting our politicians to be better some things than we are. Right? We want our politicians to be men of integrity, men of substance, men of wisdom and reason. And none of that follows from the statement made about grabbing her by the pussy.
No,
That's my argument.
I think we want to delude ourselves that our politicians are perfect or that they are
Well, I'm not saying perfect.
pristine.
I don't think anybody is. Uh-oh. Hope you didn't drop out again. Oh, man. Damn it. Charles, your internet. Oh, man. I hope he comes back. Let's just, until he comes back, we'll just address some of these questions. Let's see here. Is not most gun violence also limited to certain conditions and locales? Yes, Christina, it can be. But that's very, there's a lot of other situations that go into that. We know for a fact that the more people that live and reside within an area, the more violence goes up. There's actually a really good argument for living in smaller groups. I'll see if Charles comes back. Let's see here. As I enter a supermarket or other public place, I find myself hoping good guys with guns are there carrying. I don't feel threatened. Yeah, I carry every day. Concealed carry permit, which is honored in almost half the states in the United States. There was it's been taken down from YouTube, but there was something of an ad campaign starring A-list actors encouraging state electors to throw elections. Yeah, there was, and it's incredibly dishonest to allow that to continue. The only thing that you can't endure in DC is to get caught with a live boy or a dead girl. Yup. That's pretty accurate. Templar, yes. Male banter is common. Trump's banter was a private conversation. It can be easily forgiven. I don't know if forgiven is the right word. Perhaps ignored. Yep, the Epstein story being and the list not being given to the public, that's a serious issue. How you doing there, Charles?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm back. So I think we might just have to end the conversation. So let's wrap up.
Okay.
What are your final thoughts on this topic today?
You know, regarding Sam Harris, I think Sam was ignorant of his own biases and ignorant of his own reasoning, and he's oh, the words are not there today. What the heck is up with me? He's eliciting the kind of idea that, no, that's still not the right phrase. Basically, he's trying to use piss poor logic, and he's not aware that he's using it. And even when people make him aware of it, he's still trying to cover himself. And it's like, that's not very humble, and it's not really a characteristic of integrity that I would wish to advocate for. He could be completely right about everything that Trump is, which I believe he is, but making the comparisons to Hunter Biden, making the comparisons to bin Laden are just inexcusable from any rational academic who believes in logic and reason. And I think this is more in line with how we should actually critique ourselves and view ourselves, to say that we are capable of making the same errors in judgment and the same mistakes in reasoning that Sam is. So we really should attempt to make every perceivable effort to diminish those behaviors in ourselves, and to use reason and logic and common sense to come to conclusions. And when they're challenged, reasonably, give those arguments charity and say, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not being completely honest with myself. Maybe I'm kind of ignoring some of my own personal biases. Maybe I'm, I can see that some people are making the inference that I'm making a bad argument using these other different conflations and equivocations. So maybe I need to dial myself back and just admit that, yeah, I could be wrong, and this is something that I have to give credit to Jordan Peterson for. Was, in his first book, 12 Rules for Life, he says, always be willing to listen to other people. They may know something that you don't. And when we're talking about human beings and talking about other human beings, the worst travesty that we can commit to them is to believe that we know who they are. Like, human beings are incredibly diverse, incredibly complicated things, and we should honor and respect them for that. And that's pretty much what I got to say on that.
Yeah, nice one, Steve. So what I will just say is this: I will just echo Christina Banks' sentiments that Sam, it's not that deep. It's really not that deep. I think
Right.
he's over analyzing Trump, and he's just dramatizing it. We can all look at Trump is a very, very simple guy. To me, I think he's one of the simplest persons you can almost predict how he's going to react in any situation. You can prod him and he's going to react in that manner. He's not this strategic evil genius, this scheming. No, no, I don't think he's that kind of person. And yes, I do recognize that his abrasive nature was counterproductive to his presidency, even to his own people, even to people that worked with him. I mean, if anyone who Trump can be singing your praises right now, and the next moment if you say anything critical about him, he's going to rain down abuses, he's going to rain down insults on you and say you're the worst person that has ever been. So he was that petty. So we can use words like that to describe Trump, not that he's petty. But we could never compare him to Osama bin Laden or say that he's an existential threat. I think that was just stretching for Sam Harris.
Why didn't you compare
Case,
him to Hitler? Why didn't you compare him to Hitler? Why bin Laden?
exactly.
You know?
Why stop there? Why stop there? Because he knew that that would be too much of an obvious stretch that people would. No, even in his Sam is a calculating guy. Even in what he's doing, he's still measuring it so that it doesn't seem so outrageous. I have no doubt that this is what he believes in his head. But
Yeah.
what he demonstrated is that at times what he believes in his head does not reflect reality, as exemplified with his statement about bin Laden being a virtuous person and then saying in the next moment that he doesn't really know much about bin Laden. So it means that he's making projections. It's just maybe it takes a very simple information about somebody and then he magnifies it and builds up information around it. That this is what I think this is. And I just hope that is not what he's been applying in his logical processes, in his ideas all this while, because he may just craft a very beautiful story. And if there's no way for you to verify it, you can see, wow, this guy is fantastic, it's phenomenal. Why not knowing that it's just wind, it's feeding people wind. So well,
Yeah.
he's entitled to his opinion, and we are entitled to criticizing him, and he's entitled to responding to our criticism, to anybody's criticisms. It's a free world
Yep.
for everyone. So that's the show. Thank you very much, Steve, for being patient with me. I know I shifted, and you've
It's
always
all
been
good,
patient
dude.
with me. I really appreciate, man.
I
Really
always try to
enjoy
make time
talking
to
to
talk to
you.
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll talk more. So that will be it for tonight.
Thanks for coming,
So
everybody.
bye, guys.
Like, share, and
Yeah,
subscribe.
yeah. Like, share, and subscribe.